Hi, and welcome back to OTTB on Tap. This is episode 17. I'm Neve.
And I'm Emily. Hey, Neve, what's on tap this week?
We've got a fun episode for you guys. I spent a couple of amazing days a few weeks ago auditing a clinic with legendary rider William Fox-Pitt. I was on the scene taking photos and videos, and I thought it would be really cool to talk to some of the riders on OTTBs. William taught clinics up and down the East Coast, and we reached out to a few participants from different locations to share their experiences. Riders we interviewed participated in sessions at the Vista in Aiken, South Carolina, Lochmoy Farm in Maryland, and Keelani Farm in Pennsylvania. Settle in for a fun recap of these sessions as we get to know the riders and their awesome OTTBs. First up, we've got Rachel Grice, who hails from PA but was wintering in Aiken and joined in the session at the Vista. And where are you based?
So I am based out of Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. So I'm in between, I would say, like Harrisburg and Philly.
You're pretty close to me then. And give us a little bit of a background on your history with horses.
So I have been riding since I was 4. I bought my first horse probably sometime in middle school. And I have always loved kind of doing it myself as far as the horses go. Have never really had like the maid horses. To me, that was no fun. I liked being able to bring them up and say, oh, I did that. So have had thoroughbreds off and on, have had some warm bloods, but I've always liked to buy like the young or the green, and did the hunters and jumpers growing up. Took a break when I went to college and everything, and kind of couldn't really find what I wanted to do after I graduated college. So I ended up back in the horses.
As a way of sucking you back in.
Ended up working with a couple different thoroughbred rehab programs. I worked with Canner at their Grantville Penn National track.
Oh, awesome.
I've worked with New Vocations at their Grantville Hummelstown location as well. And from that, I ended up teaching full-time and ended up picking up a college IHSA team, and things kind of went from there.
Yeah.
And as I was getting back into things, decided, don't really want to start showing hunters and jumpers again. Was okay and as a junior, but as an adult, and especially as a professional, you're so limited as to what you can show in.
Yeah.
That to me, it didn't make sense. So I ended up switching to eventing. I got connected with a trainer that had kind of done the same things, grew up hunters and jumpers, switched to eventing in college. And we did a little bit together for a while, and then she had to leave the area. So kind of ended up on my own again, but have gone from there.
Okay.
So far think this is my 5th event horse that I have fully trained myself from the beginning.
Oh, awesome.
So,
which William Fox-Pitt clinic did you attend?
So we did the one-day clinic in Aiken. And
tell us about the off-the-track thoroughbred that you brought, and if you could give me their jockey club name, that would be super.
Yeah, so I call her Annie is her bar name, but her jockey club name is, I don't know how to pronounce it right. I want to say patache or pastiche. It's a weird spelling, but I do show her under her jockey club name, and we have her tip number under her jockey club name and everything. I just roll with it.
And then tell us a little bit about her. How long did she race? How old is she? Just some stats.
Yeah, so she is 9 this year, and I'm actually going to pull up her bloodline because I can never remember who she's by or anything.
Yeah.
She did race until 2020. So she's 9 this year. And she actually came through the Turning for Home program.
Yeah.
She bounced back to them twice before I got her.
Oh, wow.
So she's a 2015. So she's by the stallion Congrats out of Alpine Spring, who's a Coronado's Quest mare.
That's great breeding.
Yeah. So she bounced back to him twice. It kind of just sounds like the first one was kind of a parent that wanted something for their kid to kind of learn how to do. And a fresh off the track thoroughbred was just really more than they should have taken for a first horse.
Oh, so well-intentioned,
Yeah. And it's one of those things I always say, I did it as a junior, but I also was a junior pre-safe sport. So I feel like things were a little different back then.
Yeah, for sure.
So she did that. And then She actually was a trail horse for the year before I bought her.
Oh, okay. That's
and
awesome.
They ended up, so they returned her, the second family returned her just because she was getting uncomfortable. They weren't sure if it was like ulcers or whatever the issue was, but she was kind of getting to the point where they couldn't really handle her. So the trainer that had her, it's Cleveland Yard. They're actually down by the Fair Hill track now.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, she had messaged me, and I had a POA pony that she really wanted. And she had a 2-year-old warm blood mare, and I was like, well, I can't really trade. I can't justify sending a riding horse and getting a young horse that's not started in return.
Yeah.
And she was like, you know what? I've got a barn full of thoroughbreds. Come pick one, and we'll see what kind of deal we can work out. And that's kind of how I ended up with Annie.
That's a cool backstory. And so how long have you had her for?
So I have had her just over a year now.
Okay.
And really took things slow with her to begin, just because she hadn't really had much formal in-ring training and stuff. Elizabeth was doing great. She was getting her started with most of the dressage basics and everything. Yeah. But she hadn't really seen jumps, didn't really know how to collect herself or actually canter in an arena. So definitely kind of was like, ooh, okay, we kind of have to just really pretend we're starting from scratch with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's kind of nice, though, when somebody else hasn't really done a lot of restarting on them. You kind of get to imprint them in your own way, but you don't really know anything about her from those years in between in terms of how she was brought along and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that's a little bit challenging.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. She can be a tricky flat ride sometimes, because I think she did have some ulcers and had some poor fitting tack at some point. So it's things, we've been treating her for the ulcers and everything. I make sure I have my saddle fitter out routinely. And when she's going great and she can stay out of her own way, we're great. We're really great. But the typical mare fashion, we like to also be a perfectionist, and then she gets mad, and then it's the drama and the temper tantrums.
So have you done any events with her yet?
I have. So last year we did, I want to say 2 or 3 starter trials, the unrecognized. Mm-hmm. I know we did the fall plantation, and we did a Wardaka starter trial, but kind of one of those things, life happens. I have 3 young horses that I'm bringing up too. So unfortunately, my personal horse took the back seat to the babies last year. So we didn't get out as much as I had hoped we could. But with where I am, we're so lucky as far as all of the schooling horse shows that we have. Yeah. Twin Brooks does a Friday night jumper series, a Wednesday night hunter series. They're 15 minutes from us. Crossroad Tack runs a show series that does hunters and jumpers. So I was able to get her out to and at least go do something, not necessarily eventing wise.
Yeah. But Wardaka and Plantation are 2 pretty big places to take a green horse. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and maybe I'll put it in the episode, but I have this really silly drawing I did of Plantation for my friends that live in states that are not hilly whatsoever. And it's just hilarious to me, just describing it to people. I'm like, no, you go up this enormous hill, and then there's this dressage court at the top. I was like, and you can see everything. It's just a lot for young horse. I mean, it's a lot for any horse, really. I think those are 2 events that are pretty major, and there's a lot of atmosphere there. So what made you want to do the clinic with William?
So I had seen that he was coming to Ocala and doing the clinic there. And I had heard rumors and whatnot that he was going to be doing the clinic in Aiken. And I was like, oh, great. This was kind of our first year really going down for a while and wintering in Aiken. We took 5 horses for a month. And so I was like, oh, that's great. Because I was trying to figure out who I was going to lesson with, what my show schedule was going to be like while we were down there. Because I did have 2 of my young horses that went with. One's also doing eventing, and one decided that it wants to do the hunters. So I was kind of watching, and then I was upset because I saw that he announced that he was doing the clinic up in, was it PA or Maryland that he was up here for?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like,
he actually
man.
did one at Lochmoy, and he did one in...
Yeah, I don't think I had seen the Lochmoy one published before I got to Aiken, but I was like, of course, he's going to Ocala, and then he's going up home, and I'm in Aiken. So when Rhonda announced that he was going to do the one day in Aiken, I was like, I need to do this because he doesn't come and do clinics here that often.
No.
We stayed at Full Gallop, and she had 3 different 2-day clinics with Lucinda Green. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's kind of one of those things. We're spoiled up here in Area 2. Like, we're 45 minutes to an hour from Boyd Martin, from Philip Dutton. Mm-hmm. I'm an hour and a half from Lochmoy, who she does the Lucinda Green clinics all the time.
Yeah.
So I was on the fence of doing the Lucinda Green clinic, and then they announced that Fox-Pitt was going to do the one, and I was like, well, I need to do that one.
Yeah. And was it a cross-country clinic, or what was it going to be in Aiken?
So it was a mix. He was short on time with the one-day clinic just because of doing the eventing showcase in Aiken and then having to come up north. So we had the option. There were cross-country schooling groups in the afternoon. And then in the morning, there was the option of a private lesson, either dressage or show jumping, or an extra cross-country lesson. I have a young daughter, so unfortunately I wasn't able to get the extra lesson in the morning, but I did do the cross-country schooling lesson with him in the afternoon.
Okay. And you were in the beginner novice group?
I was. And I would say, so my mare hadn't done anything rated eventing, obviously. We went down to Aiken with the intention of starting her at beginner novice and kind of seeing how she does. We had been schooling some novice and training stuff back here, and she's been doing the 3-foot 3-3 jumpers. Okay. I just need to see, because she is that trickier flat ride, so the dressage isn't always there. And that's not necessarily my strongest part of it either, with not growing up doing that.
Yeah.
So did 2 of the events at Full Gallop at beginner novice. And then with the way the clinic fell, I didn't feel comfortable entering the novice or the training groups just because we hadn't really done enough at that height for me to feel like it would be beneficial for us, or that we wouldn't necessarily be potentially unsafe or in the way of somebody else.
Yeah, that's really smart. And you're talking about her having some weaknesses on the flat. You know, when you don't have all of that rideability all of the time, those jumps start to feel very tricky and awkward when you lose the rideability in between the fences. But I also appreciate the fact that you were like, I don't want to mess up the group, because I rode with Lucinda a year ago, and there was a horse in our group that unfortunately ended up sort of derailing our first day. And I think the rider learned a lot, but it was just one of those things where the preparation wasn't necessarily there. So tell me a little bit about what he did with you guys.
Because he ended one group and came right to us. We made sure we had our horses fully warmed up. And then once he came over to start our session, had us introduce ourselves, and he was like, all right, so everybody's warmed up, everybody's kind of gotten started. He goes, I want to see you guys all. We were in a smaller area that had from like ground rails up through a couple novice fences. Had some ditch options, a little bank complex, and a little water complex. He's like, I want to see you guys go out. I think everybody, horse-wise, level-wise, is capable of trotting everything in this area that we're at. He's like, I want to see everybody go trot as much as you can for like 10 minutes. And he kind of was like, the 2 most important things is you have to think of everything out here is trottable, and you only get one chance at it. Yeah. He's like, so if your horse stops, that's it. Skip it.
This all sounds very familiar from the clinic that I audited.
Yeah. And for me, it was an interesting way to think of things. Because I ride the green horses, because I ride the young horses, it's kind of like, oh, it's okay, we'll try again. And it really makes you think of, you need to treat schooling like you treat a competition. You can't afford that 20-point penalty that you would have a refusal. And it was funny. My mare did stop at one of the fences, and he goes, oh no second tries. And I said, fair enough. So we walked off. And then after that kind of 10-minute session, he was like, okay, so Rachel, you stopped at this one. Why didn't you make her walk over it? And I was like, oh, I misunderstood, because he had said you have to back your horse away from it then, not turn them away from it. I had misunderstood that as you have to back away and you're done. where he meant you back up a couple steps and then you just kind
go
of
from there.
run it
Right.
out.
Yeah. He's notorious for making people walk jumps.
That's fine. I misunderstood. That was my mistake. And I was like, well, does it count as a second attempt if I try to trot it the other direction? He goes, no, go do that.
And then how did he build up what you guys were doing after you warmed up?
Yeah, so he started kind of stringing some of the small stuff together in the area we were at. And then after everybody was fairly comfortable and their horses were going well enough with the exercises we were doing, he took us from the little warm-up area out into more of an open area. So in the small area, we warmed up with kind of more roll tops, more gallop type fences.
Yeah.
In between doing some up and down banks and doing the water complex. And there was a little ditch that we could also school over. So he kind of hit all of the big, more technical things in the smaller, warmed up, compressed area before we went out. And then once we moved out into the bigger area, he started upping the jump height a little bit and more of the technicality as far as what we were doing.
Was there anything that you felt like your mare struggled with or that she had trouble with during the clinic?
So I would say the biggest thing that we kind of struggled with is she can be a little hesitant as far as going into the water. She's very careful with the footing. Mm-hmm. So one of the things he had us doing, and this was towards the end of the clinic then, was we were doing ditches, tricaners, and then jumping into the water, jumping out of the water, and just kind of going through it. Mm-hmm. So she was fine as far as like the tricaner stuff went. And then you kind of came up a hill and there was a little black pipe that was right at the edge of the water. And she kind of stopped at that the first time and was like, oh, there's a water complex right on the other side of that. But she walked right over it, went forward. And then we did finish the exercise. We went through the water, came back around, jumped out of the water over a bigger pipe, jumped into the water over a different fence, out of the water over a different fence. And it was kind of nice to see how he had us approaching that and building up to the harder question of landing into the water off of a bigger jump where they couldn't necessarily see it.
Yeah.
Versus just going through the water and hoping for the best.
And now you're seeing a lot of jumps into the water at training level too. So I feel like that's great that you got to school that a lot. Was there anything in particular that William mentioned about off the track thoroughbreds or thoroughbreds in general that you remember?
I wouldn't necessarily say that there was anything he truly mentioned. He definitely seemed to like the fact that they typically have more try and they've definitely got more gas in the tank typically than some of the newer bred style warm bloods.
Yeah.
But no, I think we had a good mix as far as what we had in our clinic group. So it wasn't necessarily like I was the only one on the thoroughbred that day.
Yeah. That helps too. Not to get singled out. And what were some of your lasting impressions from riding with him? What were some of your takeaways? Or was anything significant that you learned?
Yeah, I would probably say for me, the biggest thing was to treat the schooling and everything like it's that competition ride. Like you only have one shot to get over the fence. You don't want that refusal or that penalty. And I liked how he kind of showed us how to string things together to build up the complexity of the question while not necessarily over facing our horses right off the bat.
Yeah, I noticed that he did that at the clinic that I watched him teach for a couple of days was all show jumping, but he kind of made a little arena style eventing course the second day and nothing was terribly big, but he really could make some very complex questions as the day went on. So it would start really pretty simple. And then by the end, it was pretty darn complicated, you know? So it's pretty cool to see how somebody like him can take something like that and leave you feeling really confident in the end. Did you learn anything new about your mare?
She is definitely braver than I give her credit for sometimes. I think it's one of those things. She gets a little irritated with spurs, so I don't ride her in spurs. She will sometimes get offended about the crop. So I didn't take that with me when I went to ride. And it really showed me that I didn't necessarily need to be riding with a crop, even though I kind of felt like I like to carry one with the young horses or the green horses, just as a reminder. It was one of those things like, if I put my leg on her and I really mean it, she is right there with me.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a nice wake up call for me in the fact that she can do this. She is very willing and very game. I just need to trust her and myself a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think there comes a time with green thoroughbreds that you get to a stage where you have to stop riding them as like a green horse, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I feel like they start to graduate from everything is the first time, everything feels like brand new, to, hey, I think this horse kind of knows its job a little bit, you know?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And it was nice too. The clinic fell the third weekend that we were down in Aiken.
Oh, perfect.
So we still had one more event to run while we were down there.
Yeah.
So I was actually able, because we ran all 3 full gallop events because we were there mid-February to mid-March.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to run all 3 full gallop events, not necessarily back to back, but it was the same course. We could kind of build up to things. The first week we were down there, she had a very green moment, a stop at the down bank because she was looking up because you could see the other horse cantering. So it was kind of that green of, oh my God, what's that? So we went from that week 1, week 2, we still did the beginner novice, but she was much more confident out cross country. And then we had the Fox-Pitt clinic. And then the third event, I actually was like, obviously she knows what she's doing enough. The clinic went fantastic. I bumped her up to novice.
Awesome.
So we made our rated eventing debut in Aiken and went from beginner novice to novice all within a month.
I mean, I feel like when you have a good clinic like that, though, too, you can live off of that feeling that you get with your horse for a long time.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And what's nice, too, is with us being stabled at full gallop, we were able to, when the cross-country course wasn't in use, we were able to kind of hack out on it. She had some open schooling and stuff available. So it was nice. It's not as nerve-wracking as when you get to Lockmoy. You're like, okay, I know what the jumps look like, but I haven't necessarily jumped these novice jumps yet.
Yeah, exactly. That's really nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us and chatting with us about your mare, Annie. If you guys make it over to Plantation or Fair Hill, you'll have to hit us up and we'll come and say hello and come meet your mare. That would be really cool. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Next up, we have Liz Harrison, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her experience at the William Fox-Pitt Clinic with her OTTB. Liz, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background with horses?
Sure. So I am a mom. I'm an amateur rider. I have a full-time job as an insurance agent, a husband, 2 dogs, the whole deal. And so I grew up riding at a local barn that did a lot with 4-H. So most of my experience as a kid, I started riding at a young age, like 5. Most of my experience as a kid was just like riding bareback and doing the local shows. And we did the local hunter shows, would do the Triangle Series. I grew up in Chester County. So I've been in this area forever. Love it. But I never evented until I was an adult, which is so funny because I feel like most kids start because they're like adrenaline junkies. But I was like, no, I want to jump jumps that fall down. I was nervous as a little kid. So when I went to college, I went to University of Kentucky and I was living and working on a farm and they evented. And so they let me take their like little pony Tucker, who was like 13 hands maybe. And I'm short. I'm only 5 foot tall. So I took him beginner novice and he took care of me and I was like, this is so fun. So when I moved home after college, I've never owned a horse until this thoroughbred that I have now. So, and I only got him 5 years ago. So people have given me rides on horses my whole life. So when I moved home, I was given a horse to ride and she was green as green, but she's this Belgian thoroughbred mare. And so I just got her started and we did the local hunter stuff. And then when we were both bored with that, I just decided to start eventing. And she was so good. We like went to Fair Hill and I was like, beginner novice looks like a good height. Yep, we can do that.
You're a lot braver than I am.
Well, I'd had like enough dressage lessons to get us through the dressage test. So I was like, this is fun. And we won. And I was like, oh, Okay.
So you're back in, fully back in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So I had her for 11 years and I evented her up through training, but she couldn't make the time for recognized events. She's just too big.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I sold her to a pony clubber and I had just gotten married and I was like, oh, this is fine. I'm just going to figure this out. And my friends had earmarked this thoroughbred for me for when he retired. And it just kind of all happened at once. I got married, I sold the mare, and then he retired. So then I had a fresh, had just raced 2 weeks ago off the track thoroughbred to restart. And then I got pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, our story together is a little disjointed because he had to go somewhere else because my husband and I decided that once I was in my second trimester, I wasn't allowed to ride the fresh off the track thoroughbred anymore.
That's a safe choice.
So then flash forward, I got him back during the pandemic, like August 2020. And he was in kind of rough shape. He needed some joint maintenance. He needed his feet fixed. Some things hadn't really happened that he needed. So it's been a while. And he only has one eye.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that.
Yeah. So he had also kind of lost confidence. So I've spent the last, how many years has it been? The pandemic seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
4 years. Kind of rebuilding that, developing our relationship. And now we're eventing at the modified level and looking to move up to prelim.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And so did he lose his eye at the track?
No, he actually lost it as a baby. He was 6 months old and out in the field with the broodmares and everything. And he got kicked in the head by another broodmare, not his mother. And the retina detached and he went to New Bolton and had his eye removed. And then he raced like that. He was really fast in training, like breaking records. Like he's so fast. But then when he would break from the gate, when he raced, he would get really overwhelmed in the group and shut down and not run.
Oh,
so.
What's his jockey club name?
Bombero.
Was there anything that you were kind of struggling with in particular with this horse?
Yeah, so he's very, very nervous. Very excitable is probably a better word. He loves his job.
Yeah.
And last summer, so this poor guy, he lost his eye when he was 6 months old. And then last summer, in the spring, we moved him up to modified. And I had time at modified, which was kind of odd because he's quick.
Yeah.
And then he started getting this weird nasal discharge. And we actually discovered that he had a cyst in his sinus.
So was he having trouble breathing?
Turns out, yeah. So we had no idea the severity of it until my vet radiographed his head to see. She was like, I think that maybe this is a sinus infection. Let's see if there's a fluid line. There definitely was, but then she also saw opacity. So she sent them over to Dr. Parente at New Bolton. And he said, yep, we need a CT. And turns out he had blockage of most of his airway and his sinus.
Whoa.
Pretty insane.
That's wild.
Yeah. The cyst had it was on both sides of the septum, so left and right. It was pretty scary because he was talking about 2 surgeries to get it out. But what he ended up being able to do was, because he's amazing, was just, I mean, it's pretty brutal. They crack open, right? It's this L-shaped scar now. Open up the front of his sinus on the right side. He went in, he cleaned all of that out as good as he could because it was really into all that tissue. So the margins weren't great. But he found a foramen, like an opening through the septum into the left side so that he could open a hole in the cyst on the left side so that one could drain on its own.
Yeah.
So then it collapsed basically.
Yeah.
So after that, my horse was depressed that we weren't competing, I swear, because he just loves to go.
Yeah.
And he's very excitable, which in the dressage test, they're always like, your horse is tense. And I'm like, yeah, because he can't wait for cross country.
Yeah.
So I've been working on that this winter, really focusing on getting him out to outings that are just very low key and this is fun and we can go to competitions and you don't have to have projectile diarrhea and be on your toes. We can do this. So that was one thing going into the clinic. I just was really perfect timing to kind of test what we had been doing throughout the winter and add some pressure and see if all of our training has been working. So,
yeah. Which level did you end up doing in that clinic?
We did the modified prelim group.
Okay. So I was at this clinic at the same farm that you rode at, and the exercises that he did for the 2-day clinic were pretty intense on day 2. And I'm assuming he probably combined some of those things for your group.
So he at first was like, it's kind of a disadvantage for me because I don't have the first day to get to know you all.
Yeah.
And so I forget what the phrase it was that he used. It was so funny though, but he was basically like, you guys get to do the tricky stuff. And we were like, cool.
Yeah. And the stuff that he set up, I have a lot of pictures of this stuff, but if you have any photos or video that you want to share with us, that would be awesome. I mean, I've ridden in that indoor a lot and it can feel quite small when there's a lot of jump set up. So tell us a little bit about the experience and how things went with your horse.
Yeah. So, well, I am a super outgoing person, but my horse and I are similar in that we get really excited and a bit of anxiety. So I think we were both kind of feeding off of each other. And we went in and he talked to us and kind of let us introduce ourselves. And then the first exercise was trot fences, which I don't do a lot of. So I was a little bit nervous. And he had talked about how he didn't want us to reapproach or represent the horses to the jumps if you had to stop.
Yeah.
He wanted you to like stop them and keep them on the line and back up and go because it's just this tiny little jump. So I trotted up to the first fence and totally forgot how to ride and just sat there like a lump. And my poor horse stopped. And then he panicked because he's like, oh my gosh, I stopped. And so he sidestepped and I, like muscle memory, just turned him. And so immediately I got scolded. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed.
Right. He's like, are you sure you're supposed to be in this group?
You can't even try an 18-inch vertical.
I'm surprised, like from the other groups on Tuesday and Wednesday, I would say that the upper level riders were probably the most caught out by some of the tasks just because their horses just don't do that stuff as often, you know. But that's pretty funny. You're like, well, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off right away.
Yeah. So he was like, you weren't even listening to me. And I was like, I was trying. But yeah, so it was kind of funny after the fact. But then he was fine. And I did, in fact, remember how to ride. But yeah, so then I just felt like for my horse, initially, like you just mentioned, we were all warming up at the same time. And that ring felt very small with 4 horses and all of those jumps. And so my horse initially was just super tense, up on his toes, not relaxing. And it was good that he gave us a solid 30 minutes to warm up and just trot around. And he had the trot poles on a curve that were set so you could trot through the inside or canter through the outside. And that was just really good. And then the trot fences too were really good for him because I don't do that very often. And my horse tends to, like, as the jumps get a little scarier or whatever, he just jumps higher. And so it was really good for us to do the trot fences because sometimes he forgets his footwork, you know, like he'll want to take off early, or it's usually take off early. I'm not even going to say he gets close because he doesn't. He's just like, buckle up. Yeah. Here we go. So I do think that was really, really beneficial. And definitely that was a big takeaway for me. I'll be implementing that going forward because especially if I can do that at a horse show as in my warm up to trot a couple fences and be like, we're okay. You don't need to be, I know he's excited, but you don't need to be frantic to get to the other side of the jump.
Yeah, you want them jumping because they sincerely want to jump and not just because they're high off of adrenaline or a little like scared or whatever. And I think that the implication of allowing a horse to be an independent thinker and know where its feet are something that I think as a trend with American trainers is maybe not utilized as much as it is in England, where they really want the horse to think for itself and know how to get itself out of trouble and maybe make it a little less pretty than we want it to be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And I was actually trying to reflect before we talked today. And so I had some of these things in the forefront of my mind. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me as well is after, or I would say even partway through, my horse and I were so much more in sync than we normally are. I was really paying attention to him and he was paying attention to me, and nothing was coming up too fast. And even when we started cantering fences, I looked back at the video, he looked so relaxed. I've never seen him go so relaxed. Yeah, it was really nice. So, and he was jumping well, and I think he felt good and confident. And like you mentioned, the jumps were obscure. They were what I would have put together when I was like 11.
Exactly, in your backyard. Yeah. Like, let me just grab this bench from over here and a bucket, and I'll put those two together. That's a skinny.
When he was stacking those plastic blocks, you know which ones I'm talking about, the big ones? Mm-hmm. And they kept falling over. Every time they put the rail on the top, they would topple over. And we're all like, we're going to jump that? It's going to like fall out from underneath the horse. Worked out well. Yeah. I mean, most knocked it over because if you barely touched it, it just
came over. Yeah. And I think that sometimes it's nice for that to happen in a way, because I know, especially as horses go up the levels, they start to get pretty belligerent about hitting fences, and it can be very upsetting for them. And I think the message that he kind of wanted the riders to deal with was, that's just one fence, get on with it, you know? And maybe I'm kind of generalizing here, but I think there's more of a feeling of wanting to make it look good here versus the just getting it done element, which I think is what makes the British riders so competitive against the US, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we want to have a hunt around in the jumper ring, you know, you want the strides to be perfect. And I really appreciated that perspective too, because my horse only has one eye. So I can't always do the same things that other people do to get it done. So
did you find there to be any like issues with his lack of sight when you were doing the exercises during the clinic?
Yeah. So, well, at first William was like, I don't know how he's going to handle that. Do you think he'll jump it? As long as I can get his eye on it, he'll jump it. It's not that I have had to learn how to ride lines as perfectly as possible, right? You can't miss it. So the one thing, I really didn't have a lot of issues until he had us jumping off of the diagonal to a left-handed turn to that, I'm going to call it Lincoln Logs, so the Lincoln Log like blocks, right? Going towards the spectators. Yeah. And we came down the line and we added, so my horse jumped a little to the left. So we landed on the inside of the line, and we've gotten really good at making those adjustments in the ring. So I just did what I do and moved him out. But then I overcompensated in his neck to make the left-handed turn, and he's missing his right eye. Okay. So his neck was bent basically to the left. Yeah. So he never got his eye on it, and we had a run out. And I was like, oh man, that sucks. And I felt bad too, because confidence for my horse, I don't want him to feel like he's failed. Yeah. But William really took the time to break it down, because he was like, look, even if you had that same ride again, this is where you need to get. And I actually should have taken more time and added more strides in the line to get out further and turned him more off of his haunch and brought his shoulders around. Yeah. And almost kept him a little bent to the outside. Yeah. So that the eye could actually see the jump. Yeah. And it's simple for a lot of people are like, you got to get your line. You got to get your line. Yes, I do. But how? How do I get my line? Yeah. So I really appreciated him breaking that down for me, because it feels a little uncomfortable at times, feeling like you need outside bend to make a left-handed turn when it's a tight turn. But that was like the best way to do it and be in balance and fit the steps in. So that was really helpful.
I almost feel like my takeaway from this conversation with you is that maybe more people need one-eyed horses so that they can learn how to ride better.
I mean, it is interesting.
Everybody's got this advantage of having a horse with two eyes, and maybe there's something to be said for the one-eyed horse experience. It's holding you really accountable.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, he is so good. And I think that it's also to his benefit that he lost it so early, so he doesn't know anything else. But there's been plenty of other horses that have competed up to high levels and then lost an eye and been able to return. Yeah. And I always say, I think that the horse that already knows the job and loses an eye does just fine, right? Yeah. When my horse is a little greener, teaching him new questions takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
A lot of time.
And I'm sure so much of that comes from his relationship with you and trusting that you're never going to be putting him in a situation he can't handle.
Yeah. Yeah. We worked on that a lot because I really feel like I was a decent rider when I got him, but he's made me a real rider, and a real horseman, because really cool. The things that we've had to go through. I mean, he is as thoroughbred as whatever the stereotypical thoroughbred. We deal with ulcers. He had his eye. Yeah. He's missing an eye. He's a cribber. He had a sinus cyst, all the things, not great feet. So he's all the things, but he's just so good. He tries so hard and he just loves his job too. Yeah. I think that's really important too. And which I've heard you and Emily talk about, that is paying attention to what the horse actually enjoys to do.
Yeah.
And not just being like, oh, they should do this. Like, I'm going to put them in this box.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really important to find them something that they really want to do, because I feel like then you're going to get the best part of a thoroughbred, which is that they're all heart for the things that they love.
Yeah.
Did William give you any particular feedback or commentary based on the fact that you were riding an off-the-track thoroughbred?
I didn't hear him mention the breed per se, but I did think about, there was a show jumper in my group who had this huge lofty stride. And he did make a comment about how, well, first of all, he was like, why are you here? It was kind of funny. But she did a lovely job. She's lovely. She's a professional. She did great. Yeah. But her horse really had a harder time doing some of these exercises.
Yeah.
Because you'd come off and the turn was right there. It was they're really fast. So he did comment on how it was with the shorter coupled horses and the horses that are a little bit, I'll say, cattier. They had just a little bit easier time with the exercises. So I thought that was really interesting. I know everybody wants a really big jumping horse, but he did talk about how event horses need to be efficient.
Yeah, and economical.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't want our horses to jump huge over anything.
Yeah.
He wanted them to jump the jump and be listening and be quick with their feet.
Yeah. And you think about that when you're on a cross-country course, every part of a second that you're spending up in the air over a fence adds up over time. And you see that when you watch the big 3 days and you see the horses going around and the warm blood start to get a little tired, but they're still jumping really big and they're just losing all of that stamina. And the time just really catches up with them. So what did you learn about your horse during the clinic?
I don't think I trust him nearly as much as I should.
Oh.
Yeah, because I worry a lot that, he's not going to see it. I put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure he's in the right spot, which is important. Yeah, sure. But I also think that there was situations during that clinic where I really had to be just really focusing on my position so I didn't get in his way.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful. And I know that my trainer has said that to me a million times, don't get in his way. Because I tend to, I did the hunters, right? So the hunters, there's usually a much bigger crest release. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to kind of throw my body.
Yeah.
And especially if I see the distance and it's going to be long, I'm trying to stay with them by getting ahead probably. Yeah. So I just really thought that afterwards I was he really does understand this now. We're no longer in that stage where he's a green bean and I have to do everything. Yeah. And I need to put more trust in him that he's got it. And I need to learn how to stay with him so that he can do his job better.
Yeah. As someone who just recently fell off going over a 2-foot oxer and was up by my horse's ears for no good reason. Yeah. they make you sit back.
Yeah.
When I got my new horse, jumping him was really strange for me because I'd only really ever ridden green horses and he knows what his job is, but he always adds, always. And it's awesome. And it's perfect for me because nothing will make you keep your shoulders back and your center of balance back more than a horse that wants to add to the base. So I've learned the hard way to keep those shoulders back and just let him do his thing. And he also uses his body really well over fences. And so I have to not only stay back, but really allow him to use his head and neck and everything. And it's definitely been a learning curve for sure.
Yeah, and I can relate to that too, because my horse, like I said, he tends to just jump higher, right? Yeah. He doesn't really use his body better. He just jumped higher a lot.
Yeah.
And so similarly, and we used to, whether it was because of the cyst, we don't really know, but he used to really root really hard too. I was constantly trying to like keep him up, like on his hind end and lift his front end. And so in conjunction with the exercises we did, I was like, look at that. You're carrying yourself. Look at that. I don't have to do it. I need to leave you alone and stay out of your way.
Yeah, I feel like we tend to bring a lot of issues to the table sometimes. It's really nice to have a situation like that, though, where you can really focus on yourself and trust your horse and, you know, get a lot out of the experience, especially because you were only doing it in one day. Did you get to talk with William at all separately or or after the clinic or anything?
No, there wasn't a lot of time between our sessions, but also I was totally starstruck and I went to the cocktail hour on Tuesday before and I didn't even have the guts to go talk to him. I was just like, what am I even going to say to William Fox-Pitt?
Well, I just had to harass him the whole time because Melissa had asked me if I would take photos at the cocktail party. And I just went into event photographer mode where I was like, I know how to do this. But being at the cocktail party really helped me for the next day because I wanted to interview William for the podcast. And I didn't have the courage to do it. But just sitting around and getting a little tipsy with him on Tuesday night was really fun. He was just having such a good time and I was interacting with him a lot. So by Wednesday, when everything was wrapping up, I felt like, okay, now's my chance. And he could not have been kinder. He was like, where do you want me? Somebody had talked to him during the cocktail party to suggest that I was going to interview him. And so I came up to him and I was like, hi, William. So I have this podcast. He goes, oh yeah, the podcast. He's like, where do you want me? And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. And then I stutter a lot when I get excited and I just babble and I start giggling because I don't know what else to do. And I don't know what came over me, but I did a 1-take 5-minute interview with him. And remembered the 3 questions I wanted to ask him, and he answered in so much detail. I actually started shaking while I was doing the video because I couldn't believe that I remembered everything and I didn't sound like an idiot. I was like, how did this happen? This is crazy. But yeah, I feel very seen with those comments. It was really sweet though. So that was the end of the second day and a couple of other people had hung out with some of the auditors and they wanted to get photos with him. And somebody goes, you just must get really tired of taking photos with him. And he's like, no, he's like, cause I know someday no one's going to want to anymore. And I was like, how are you like that down to earth and humble? And you're like one of the best riders in the entire world.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Some days people are going to stop asking. And I was like, no, they're not.
No, they're not.
No, they're not, William.
No. Oh my gosh. That is so nice to hear, really.
Yeah.
The only courage I could muster was to go in and say thank you before I shipped my horse home. But the other thing too, I don't know if this is just me. I think it's part of my nerves when I have to talk to somebody, but I am really short. I'm only 5 foot tall. So like when I have to talk to somebody that's really, really tall, sometimes I have a hard time hearing them. So I was so worried and had gotten so in my head that like, yeah, I could talk to him, but what if I can't hear what he's saying? Because I'm down here and I'm just like, yeah, exactly.
That's so funny.
I totally talked myself out of like any conversation. And I was like, I don't even know what to say. Am I going to be like, what did you think of my horse? I don't know. So have a great day. I just said, I hope you come back. And he was like, I'll be back. And I was like, okay, cool. Bye.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're so lucky in our area to have so many great people coming through all the time. Having audited the clinic for 2 days, I'm not really sure how I would have felt about riding in it, but I never get tired of watching people teach and hearing new perspectives and taking ideas from different clinics and setting them up in my own arena and stuff like that. So I think it's really valuable. Anytime you have the opportunity to watch one of the greatest people in the world teach, you jump at it, you know? So well, thank you so much for joining us, Liz. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your work day.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited to be able to talk with you, and I would be remiss not to mention that I was a recipient of a scholarship from an anonymous donor from Area 2. And that was just incredible because like you were just mentioning, I was like, okay, yeah, I can swing $60 to go and audit for a day. But I've got a lot of things on my plate and financially, I just, especially after his surgery last year, I can't afford to spend the money to ride in this clinic.
I met the person at the cocktail party who donated the scholarships, and it couldn't have been a nicer human being. So it's very, very cool. And I love seeing people giving back to the sport in that way. It's very cool. So next up, we have Taylor Cusack, who is based in...
My horse is in Dickerson, Maryland. I'm in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside DC.
And you took part in the William Fox-Pitt clinic that was based at Lochmoy. And was it a one-day clinic or a two-day clinic?
1 day.
Okay.
I want to say most of his clinics up and down the East Coast might have been 2 day, but the Lochmoy one was in fact 1 day. He already said he wants to come back next year and do a 2 day, so I'm excited for that.
Amazing. That's awesome. And so tell us a little bit about you and your background with horses.
Sure. So I'm very late to the eventing game. It's just something I've always wanted to do my entire life. I'm 33 years old right now. I started eventing when I was 30, when I had my life more together, more time, more resources. I grew up riding at camp a couple times a year, in the summers, very, very casual. So, when it comes to truly learning in all phases of eventing, I was pretty brand new to it about 3 years ago. And so I found a wonderful trainer in my area, Natalie Hollis, to kind of take me on from the ground up. And I spent about a year on one of her wonderful schoolmasters, just learning the ropes. And about 2 years ago, I bought my own horse for the first time. He is just the light of my life. He's wonderful. He's gone through prelim. I'm still chilling at the lower levels, learning all the stuff. And we've had quite the journey together. Yeah. Our partnership is really strong. And he's really come into his role from being a professional's horse and an upper level prospect down to bopping around the small stuff and teaching me how to do things. He's very kind. He's the definition of a horse that's able to take a joke. He never gets mad at me when I screw something up, which obviously is all the time. And we just have a good time together. And we had an absolute blast the day of the William Fox-Pitt clinic.
So tell me about your off-the-track thoroughbred. Can you give us his jockey club name and some stats about him?
Sure. So his jockey club name was Clear Crossing. And just because I was a first-time horse owner and had all the horsey dreams, I actually ended up changing his name to Eventing Rebellion.
I love it.
There's just a lot that went into kind of creating that. This has quite literally been a lifetime dream. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he became Eventing Rebellion, but he was Clear Crossing in the jockey club. I believe he had 4 starts, and I've seen actually some recording of him racing as a youngster. And it's really funny because he's just out of the gate, he's just fire, and he's like blazing down the path. And then it's like just one moment of the race, it's like he gets bored. And then he just starts kind of cantering really chill. And you literally see the finish of the race. The horse is blazing across the finish line. And you see Darcy. Darcy's it's his barn name. And you see Darcy just like chilling, cantering across the finish line.
It's like, why? He's like, why are you guys going so fast? It's stupid.
He was like, oh, okay. Well, this is nice. But yeah, so he's a character. Quickly got my trainer, Natalie Hollis, and our other trainer, Suze Cornu, at Destination Eventing, bought him as a youngster to be a sales horse. And Suze Cornu ended up falling in love with him as an upper level prospect for herself in eventing. And so I think she bought him when he was 4 or 5. And so they had a couple years. They ended up going prelim together. But then she discovered he might prefer a job being someone's lower level teacher. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I came into the picture. And she sold him to me. And so we've been together a lot for the last 2 years. Yeah, and he's been teaching me all the stuff.
Yeah. You sound exactly like me. Like to a T. In fact, I didn't really get into eventing seriously until I was like 30. I got my first horse when I was like 32 years old, was a thoroughbred. But my horse that I have now competed up through prelim, and I got him to be my beginner novice and below.
Yeah.
I have no aspirations to go any higher than that. And he is the most spoiled adult amateur horse you'll ever find.
Yeah. Yes.
I fell off of him recently for the first time in a jump lesson. And I think he actually was so worried about me because I was trying to piece his bridle back together, and he came up to me, and everybody saw this. It was crazy. He came up to me, like he walked straight up to me and put his head on my shoulder and was like, "I'm really sorry. I tried to keep you on me."
That's so sweet. I love that. And, and it's funny I saw your post online about that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the post you said it was something about first time you had fallen off in the past like 10 years, which really blew my mind because I fall off all the time. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And this includes like the couple of years that I was a working student in my late 30s where like I was riding nothing but green horses. I don't know. I've got some stickability, or I was a gymnast when I was younger. So I feel like I've got that great like ability to cling on. And I landed on my feet when I fell off of him, which was crazy because I was up by his ears, and I looked down at the filler and I was like, that's going to really hurt if I land on that. And somehow I kicked my feet out of the stirrups, kicked my legs over my head, and landed on my feet. And I think my horse and I were both really surprised.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, that's not me. I'm like a lawn dart when I fall off.
Maybe I should get a little bit more used to falling off because, well, I said to Sally too, I was really nervous about this lesson. It was my first jump lesson of the year, and he feels a little spicy, and for him, spicy is such a joke, but it's just a different feeling. And then I thought, well, what's the worst that could happen? I fall off, and I fell off, and I was fine. So.
Oh my gosh. Says Sally Cousins, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so not to get digress too much here, but funny story. So 3 months after I got my horse, we were still building the partnership. We went down to Aiken to her farm to spend a couple weeks there.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Unfortunately, literally 30 minutes after arriving into the trip, we were going to go hack around, and I fell off of the mounting block and had a really, really nasty leg break.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. So I never actually got to meet Sally. They have to get used to the adult amateur special.
Yes.
which is exactly what you just described. And
which
that's
is
exactly
give me a minute. I just gotta hoist myself onto you. He's 15 too. What is my problem?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened. I got on, he kind of wiggled away, and I just lost my balance, and his leg ran into mine. And it was like a freak accident like that.
Oh my God.
So the day after, while I was, in the hospital having surgery, my trainer and the other working students basically mounted him and dismounted 50 to 100 times at the mounting block. And they said, "No worries, Taylor, he's never going to move again." When you're back, you're going to be good. But yeah, I'm very happy it didn't happen jumping or really riding, because I tell you, the scariest part of every single ride for me is the mounting block and getting on.
Yeah. And I feel like, it's funny because we talk a lot about this with thoroughbreds and how they're just not used to, especially right off the track, that can be a really dangerous part of the process. And I think that a lot of people take it for granted. Even now, having a trained horse, I definitely don't, because I feel like anything can happen. You could forget to tighten your girth and end up underneath the horse. There's just so many possibilities of things going really, really poorly at that stage. And I remember Jimmy Wofford used to talk about that all the time. He would say that is single-handedly the most dangerous part of riding, is that second you put your foot in the stirrup and you're swinging your leg over. So
you're just it's a vulnerable position for you.
Yeah. There's an awful lot of trust happening in that moment.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. And then the first time I had to mount back after my injury, I literally had 4 people surrounding my horse.
Oh,
because I was about to have, I stood at the mounting block for probably several minutes before I actually swung my leg over, because I was just it's like a PTSD moment.
Was it your left leg?
My right leg.
Okay. Well, at least there was that. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have to, it probably would have taken me even longer to get back on if I had to support myself up on, because I couldn't, even when I first mounted my horse again, I still couldn't put my foot in the stirrup to support myself at that point. So I was still riding stirrupless and just walking, because And, you know, that whole incident has been a huge part of our partnership journey. Because if you would have asked me 2 weeks after that accident, I was never afraid to ride again. But I was definitely terrified of my horse. You know, that trust had just kind of blown up. And I said, okay, no, I'm going to sell him and I'll start over with another horse. And we'll go from there. But, you know, when I finally got to see him again, maybe like 2 months later, when I was strong enough to like walk with a cane around the barn, we reunited. It was a very emotional moment. Yeah. And I was, no, we're going to figure this out together. And the year and a half since then has just been a lot of ups and downs, but a lot of strong trust and partnership made. And I'm so proud of us because of that. I love him so dearly. And I just feel like we've come so far and connected, and like not even talking about like levels or competition or riding.
No, it's just a bond that's like
it's just, he knows me, I know him, and like there's nothing I would not try with him. That's how strong we feel right now.
Yeah, I know exactly that feeling. I ran into my horse's former trainer who knew him and his old rider. I mean, she had him for 10 years, and I'd had him for like 6 months, and I ran into her at Fair Hill, and she was like asking about him, and she's like, how's your perfect boy? And I'm like, oh, he's so good. And she goes, I think that horse waited his whole life to meet you.
Oh,
and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I waited my whole life to meet him.
I know, my heart.
And I've never had that experience. I mean, I've owned 3 personal horses of my own. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, he's my 4th, but I've owned a lot of other horses that were sales horses, and I've never had, and my last thoroughbred I had for 5 years, and I loved him. He was incredible, the fanciest thoroughbred I've ever ridden. But there's something different when you meet that horse. That's your horse. Like it's I don't know how to explain it, but I'm like digressing so much because I like see so much of you and me. So what were you kind of expecting to get out of the clinic at this stage with your horse, and what division did you enter?
So we entered a novice division. That's where we're competing pretty confidently right now, and we're starting to feel a little bored. So I'm, hopefully, things go well this season. We'd like to move up to training, maybe do like a training or 2 starter by the end of the season in the fall sometime. Mm-hmm. But with clinics, obviously, like I'm new to horses, I'm new to training. I'm new to the clinic format. Mm-hmm. And I've got a team of folks way more experienced who are professionals and even non-professionals who've just been involved a lot longer than I have to guide me and say, hey, even though you've been training really confidently home, enter the novice division because, in a clinic, a lot of the times you get pushed out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And you're just schooling training. You don't want to be pushed out of your comfort zone at training, And so, we signed up for novice division, really excited about that. It was at Lochmoy. Like I said, we're there at least once a month to ride. So it really feels like home field advantage on the Derby course, no less. That's our favorite thing to do in the winter. And we're so lucky that our barn is 5 minutes from Lochmoy to have that at disposal throughout the winter. I've only done a handful of clinics in my time, so I don't have a ton to compare to, but I did learn that we're going to do some tough stuff. I was so excited that day. I've been counting on the days for this clinic. William Fox-Pitt has been like, he's, Lucinda as well, but like, that'd be like a top 5 rider. I'd always, like a bucket list rider to get to ride with. And so when we got there, I'm still feeling confident. I'm feeling really excited. And then I was watching the group before us ride a little bit before I tacked up. Mm-hmm. And they were doing some serious stuff. And by serious stuff, I mean, not even just like the size of the jumps, but the combinations and the lines that William was having them do. And I got nervous all of a sudden. Super, super nervous. I was like, oh my God. And so I just kept telling myself, okay, we're just going to go out. We're going to have fun and we're going to do some stuff. We're going to ride with the William Fox-Pitt and it's going to be great. Yeah. So I had a bunch of our folks from the barn came to watch, and one of my friends was videoing the whole clinic for me. And he caught this great clip of us were warming up and William was watching us kind of go and canter and see how the horse goes. I kind of walk past the fence and my friend yells, "Smile for the camera, Darcy." And I just look at him and I say, "I'm going to die." I was so nervous. All my confidence had flown out the window. And I'll send you this clip.
That's amazing. I love it.
But I came into the day super confident. And then I was just trying to convince myself at the venue, hey, we're just going to have a good time. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Is there anything in particular that you or your horse struggle with that you were thinking about going into the clinic?
Yeah. So for me right now, a lot of striding, the approach to the jump, and then striding in between the jumps. I would say that's true for both our show jump and our cross country at the moment. When you're jumping at elementary, beginner, novice, even novice level, if your horse gets a flat jump over something, it's not the end of the world. You're learning, figuring it out. But once you cross that bridge and you're trying to school training at really anything over 3-3, you have to pay a lot more attention to making sure you give your horse the best opportunity to get that proper bascule over the jump. And that has been really hard for me. And like I said, my horse is very agreeable and he's forgiving with all the weird riding and mistakes and strides I give him up to the jumps. But that's, as we start to jump bigger things, that's kind of been a theme amongst not only my weekly lessons and clinics I've been to, is that all the clinicians has said, okay, you can't just like see a long spot and tell your horse to take it. You need to ride his butt up to the jump so that he's getting, that he's jumping properly over it as the jump. If you don't pay attention to that, that's when accidents can happen. And that's what Stephen Bradley said to me in the I rode with him twice this winter.
Oh, I heard he's amazing to ride with.
Oh, he is. Oh my God. He's the kindest human being. And he's just so positive. But then in that moment, I thought I had a great round. And he said, no, you can't tell him to take the long spot anymore. That's when accidents happen. He'll be direct when he needs to be direct, but he's just the most wonderful and kind human being ever. But so I'm thinking about that a lot as I go into this clinic. And anytime you get a long approach to a jump, I get in my head. And that's my specialty. I get in my head. I overthink it. I try to over micromanage it. Yeah. And really trying to find the balance between those things. And we did a bit of a intro circle when we started the clinic, and I explained my striding leading up to the jump, how I approach, making sure I keep that nice rhythmic canter and things like that. That's kind of the big theme that's been on my mind the last couple months and kind of going into this clinic.
What sort of exercises and things did he have you guys working on during the clinic? How did he build up the session?
So first, after he had us kind of all canter around and he watched us go, Luhmühlen, if you remember, has those big arenas. And we were in one of the arenas that there were just fixed jumps of all levels, just spread out all over the place. And he said, pick some elementary and some intro, maybe a beginner, novice. And he said, just trot over them, which that's the thing I hate the most. And that's the thing my horse hates the most. He does not believe in trotting jumps. He's like, no, I'll just do a canter and we go over. And I could feel him as I would try to get him to trot the jump. He said it's easier to canter. Yeah. Taylor, let me canter over the jumps. He's just like, no. He's really cute and opinionated that way. He's like, no, I know better. We've been through this. I know better. So why are we? And so I was really struggling because I hate trotting jumps. So it's in my head. I'm not good at it. And my horse didn't want to trot. And all of a sudden, so they had William over the speaker system coaching us all, so auditors could hear well. We could hear a little better because the Luhmühlen was huge. The arenas are huge. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to get him to trot. And at one point, I just gave up and I started cantering little jumps because I just get nervous. And then all of a sudden, over the loudspeaker, I hear, Taylor, you're supposed to be trotting the jumps. And I'm just like, oh, God, I was the first name call out loud. I could see my trainer who was watching over on the fence line, just like palm to face. So that's how we warmed up. Honestly, it was a kind of a nice communication exercise for my horse and I, just because it really gets him paying attention to me and that, hey, we might be doing something a little different today, which was nice. And then he had us do, which I really liked, instead of doing, when he goes cross-country schooling, I feel like in a row, you might do 3 jumps in a row, 2 to 3, maybe 4. What William did, which was really nice, he would set like almost 8 jump courses for us. It was longer courses. He started us with a smaller course. Everyone jumped it really rhythmically. I was in a group of 5. And I would say it was a really strong novice group. The horses were good. The riders were really good. And so everyone was really riding in rhythm well. And so being a strong novice group, I think William saw that and said, okay, well, I can up the ante a little bit here. And so he takes us down to the lower arena where there's a lot bigger stuff. And stuff that's so big. And like I said, I go to Luhmühlen a lot. Stuff I'd never jumped in my life before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he sets up a course and there's 2 other riders from my barn. So we know each other well. We've been to Luhmühlen a lot. And, he's setting up the course and we're all looking at each other saying, hey, that's been on the modified course. That has definitely been on the training course. And I hadn't schooled or jumped anything like that cross country. I've been focusing show jump stuff in the winter. Yeah. But, right, here's the clinic. Let's go. And I'm very lucky that my horse has kind of been there, done that. So I know he can handle it. I know my riding's going to be atrocious leading up to these things, but I have all the trust and faith in my horse. I'll try anything on him. And I'm so glad we kind of came into the clinic with that partnership because we needed it that day.
Yeah.
And so he put together some great courses for us. Like I said, longer 8 to 9 jump courses. We would do a jump right at the top of the hill, go down a pretty steep incline, go down a good sized novice bank. And then we had the option of just going past the jump that was in front of it or go over. And it happened to be a pretty good sized training log coupe. And I ride down banks a lot better if I have something to keep my eye on afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, let's go for it. Between that combination, that was definitely one of the tougher combinations I'd ever ridden myself in my life. But once we got going, the momentum, the confidence just keeps rolling. And on this same course, and remember, I mentioned earlier, I like to fall off a lot. So this is where this is going. We were coming around to the end of the course. It was the last jump on course. And I think it was a mix of, I was starting to get a little tired because, like I said, while my horse is I wouldn't say he's not point and shoot, but if you point him at a jump, you need to ride him to that jump. And it takes a lot. He takes a lot of body, And I definitely get a bit fatigued by the end of the course. And so I kind of turned him to the last jump, which actually happened to be the first jump of the course. So he had already jumped this jump going the other direction.
Yeah.
And I didn't get him straight. I didn't get him straight enough. And sometimes he can, I don't know if it's an honesty thing. He's like, oh, if you don't want to go, I'm not sure. I don't want to go. And so he just stops the jump and I plop over his shoulder, splat on the ground. And there was a professional photographer there and she got the most fantastic shots of us in this moment. I would be happy to share.
Yes.
And I know priorities, right? Get the video, get the shots of the fall.
Oh my gosh. When I fell off the other day, the girl that was doing video for me, the first thing I said was, you got that on video, right? And she goes, oh, I deleted it. And it was my phone. And I was like, oh, it's in the deleted items folder. I'm going to recover that later.
Yes, exactly. I mean, eventer priorities.
Yes.
And so we were flying on Cloud 9. It was definitely one of the tougher courses I ever put together. And of course, I blew it at the last jump. And William was really nice. It was funny. He goes, look, he should have jumped that. He completely blamed my horse. But if you know my horse, and I know my trainer was thinking the same thing as she was watching from the fence line, I was like, no, I didn't have him straight to the jump.
Yeah.
No, I took my leg off a teeny tiny bit. And that's all my horse needs is to be like, oh, you don't want to go? No, stop.
Yeah.
And like I said, I fall off a lot, and I've fallen off a lot since my accident. So I have gotten used to it. And so I got back on and I redid that last part of the course. And for the rest of the clinic, it wasn't a confidence hit. Luckily,
it sounds like everything else was just so good that that was just a little blip.
Exactly. It was so fun. It was so good. I was so proud of us. So I was like, we ate it at the last jump. It happens. And William was really nice about it. And it was such not a big deal that even when we finished the clinic and we were all walking together with William back to the parking lot area, we're all on cloud 9, like, woo, we did it. Yay. And William's like, yeah. And none of you fell off. And we all kind of turn around and look at him. And I was like, well, except for me. He was like, oh, that was such not a big deal that I just completely forgot. And exactly. Let's just stick. I did not eat it in front of one of the world's greatest horsemen of all time.
So did you learn anything in particular about your horse during the clinic?
Definitely. So it had been about 6 months since I had previously fallen off. So I was definitely due for a fall. And, in that moment, it was just a reminder that no matter how good things are going, I must ride him every single stride to the jump. And even though that is something I've known in the past, getting that reminder, especially as the jumps get higher and the combinations get tougher, just that reminder of needing to be vigilant and in concentration the whole time, no matter if it's that last jump of the course. And that was really important to get that reminder, I think, especially going into this season, if we're looking at a move up, because now that's going to stick with me, Absolutely. And we did maybe 4 or 5 other more jump courses, and the stuff just got tougher. Because, William has talked a lot publicly about the change in cross country over the years, the change of the phase, how it's become a lot more technical, and you have to have more of a show jump canter to attack some of these combinations. And so these were the type of combinations we had done these tight turns for in a show jump context, but I had never attempted anything like that in a cross country setting. And so we would jump a very sizable coupe and have to take very tight, maybe 6 stride turn to something else also very sizable. And so having that fall early on in the clinic on that first course was the reminder I needed, because for the rest of that clinic, as the combinations he asked us to do got harder, the turns got harder, my God, I kept my leg on.
Yeah.
I was like, when in doubt, Taylor, just keep squeezing.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misnomer when you get a horse that is experienced. I mean, there are probably out there actual point and shoot schoolmasters.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
do not call my horse that. Anyone that's ridden him, like, he looks very easy, and then people ride him and they're like, oh, you really have to ride him. And that's been a big learning curve for me. And also, he really likes to get to the base, which is great. And he'll go from the base. But if he's underpowered at the base, it just feels like he just pukes over the jump. But if he's powered at the base, it's the most beautiful feeling. And so learning how to find the pace and the power in his smaller stride, because he's little, has been really cool. And I think, like you're saying, that learning how to harness that power, keep your leg on, get to the base, and feel that great bascule feeling over the fence is like, you want to recreate that as much as possible.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. Absolutely. And it's so hard. Oh my goodness. This winter of training sessions has been really eye-opening, because before this winter, I really wasn't jumping consistently higher than novice height. And it was all about confidence, because I'm coming back from the leg injury, and that's consistently the obstacle I always had to return to. And once I finally got my confidence in jumping, and I'm letting him go forward, and I'm going forward with him over the jump, I'm not riding defensively in show jump. That was a real aha moment for us. Yeah. But the aha moment was a bit short-lived, because then I quickly realized, okay, I've got all this confidence, but now I need to harness the energy properly. Now I have to really learn how to ride him between the jumps. Yeah. And so that's just one of the cool parts of the sport, is that you learn something and you quickly are given another goal to go after. And there's always something new to work on.
And I really like what you said at the beginning of our chat, which was that you were starting to get bored at the level that you were at. And I think that that's something that I wish more people took note of and really respected, because I think that there's a lot of people moving up in the sport that I feel like their ambitions come from a place that is not necessarily safety based. Right. I'm a big believer in just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yes. So again, I'm an adult weenie rider, but at the same time, I watch an awful lot of eventing, and it's a dangerous sport. And I think that finding yourself in a place where you're schooling above the level that you want to compete, all of those kind of things that most good trainers will tell you, is that if you're schooling training at home, you should be competing at novice, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by great people who are saying exactly the things that you just said. My trainers are always guiding me under that. You're schooling training at home, yeah, you compete at novice. Don't move up a level until you're feeling bored. Wait till that bored feeling kicks in, because that usually means that's kind of your trigger moment to really start prepping for the next.
And there's also that kind of feeling of, just because you're super comfortable at novice doesn't mean that you can't improve on what you're doing at novice, right?
Oh,
like, is your dressage awesome? Are you consistently scoring sub 30 in dressage? If not, maybe you don't have the rideability to ride stadium at the level above. So there's a lot of those factors that I think that people sort of ignore, but.
Oh no, it's so true. And that whole progression, like how the three phases, all feed in together. Like I said, I was completely cold to dressage. I had no idea what riding with connection meant. And once I started to understand what each dressage test at each level really meant in terms of what's required in stadium, what's required in the cross-country course, I just developed such a stronger appreciation for the dressage phase. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool how it was just designed that way. And just,
Did he have anything specific that he mentioned about off-the-track thoroughbreds during your session?
No, not specifically. We did have several off the tracks in our group. Yeah. And we had like a little cocktail party after all the clinic groups had gone. Like I said, our barn's luckily 5 minutes from Loch Moyes. So we went back to cure the horses and then came back for the party. And finally, when we got a chance to come up to William and talk and thank him, and I'm still on cloud 9 about how fun the day was and how we jumped all these big, difficult things. And I was telling William this, I was like, I wanted to talk about all the awesome exercises we did, how cool they were. And he just wanted to talk about how awesome he thought our horses were. Yeah. Yeah. And
he's such a true horseman. It's really incredible.
He is. I was there with my good friend her horse is also an off the track. And we were on cloud 9 about all the awesome stuff we did. And he's like, I just want to talk about how nice he thought our horses were. And I was like, I'm melting. That's so sweet. We love our horses too.
It's so humanizing to meet these icons in the sport that you realize that the thing that we have in common is that we all just love horses so much.
Yes.
We love the athleticism, the try, the heart. It's very, very cool. I interviewed him at the end of his sessions in PA, and I asked him 3 questions about thoroughbreds, which we're going to post alongside this episode. And man, the way he answered the questions was so generous and so from the heart. It was really, really cool. And I was like, man, this guy just loves horses. He just loves these athletes so much. It just emanates out of him. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you felt that throughout the clinic. We had a really good group. We were vibing with William a lot throughout the time. We really had a blast. We're all when I fall off, we're all laughing. It was really good attitudes and vibes all around. And one of the final courses we did in the clinic was a really tight serpentine and 3 jumps at each point of the serpentine and large ones. And it was the last part of the course. And my horse loves to take a giant jump in. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, I'm going to miss the first turn because we're going to take it too big. And that's totally what happened. He took it too big and I'm trying to turn him to go to this next jump. And you can actually hear me shout, "Oh, bananas," in the video as I'm trying to get my horse to make this very tight turn to this next large jump. And we were vibing. Everyone's feeling good. And I got an extra stride in there, but my horse, being the wonderful, perfect creature he is, goes, "Oh, next jump. Okay." Take a weird line and he goes over. And I was so excited we made the turn that I forgot about the last jump in the course. And I just blew past it because I was like, woo, screaming. And all of a sudden I realized I missed the jump and I turned around and I go, "Oh, I'm sorry. I missed the jump." And you hear William over the loudspeaker. He goes, "Oh, that's okay. We were just really excited for you."
That's awesome.
He's like, "We were excited for you anyway. It's all good. Just come around and try it again." That was just like the vibe and the attitude for everybody the entire clinic.
Cool.
I couldn't have asked for a more perfect day all around for everybody. And it felt like being like at Disneyland for a day.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for chatting with us. I cannot wait to see pictures and video from the clinic.
Thanks for having me.
I'm just going to turn them. Next up, we have Rachel Childers of, where are you based?
I live in Simpsonville, South Carolina.
Oh, okay. And you took part in the Aiken Clinic.
Yeah.
So just give us a little background about you as a rider and your experience with horses.
That is a complicated question. I am not a competitor particularly anymore. When I was a kid and early adulthood, I was in the rodeo.
Oh, wow.
And then kind of like to fix the rodeo problems, I was like, oh, I'll learn to ride English and that will improve my seat. And then I kind of redirected my entire life. I went to be a working student summers during college at Bruce Davidson's and kind of like kept going through college and being a working student, alternating with getting a degree. And then I got my PhD. We kept doing the same thing. And now I have a job in South Carolina and I have one horse at a time, little by little, always project horses.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the off-the-track thoroughbred that you took to the clinic.
And
give us their jockey club name, too.
Yeah, her jockey club name is Debutante Ball, which I don't love. So a friend of mine came back from the feed store one Saturday and said, hey, let's go look at this horse in North Carolina. And she said, we should take the trailer. I'm like, oh, okay. So we took the trailer and I did buy the horse. Honestly, in retrospect, I'm not sure why. She was a very challenging ride and I could see the star on her head the whole time I rode. But she did jump the first jump and I pointed to her hat. So that was probably why. And so I bought her in 2018. So she's been a long project.
Yeah.
And she is finally kind of come down into being a pretty stable horse and a pretty reliable horse, but still very green. I wouldn't call her trained. She's just broke.
Fair enough.
We've done a couple novices. I did go and take a few lessons with Bruce Davidson with her a couple years ago. And then last summer, I spent the summer with Kristen Schmolze. I volunteered to help her while she was recovering from an injury. She's only a couple hours from my house. And so we got a lot of training because we were there all the time. And then I've been taking some clinics with Andrea Davidson.
Oh, right, because she comes up there all the time.
Yeah, she comes up about once a month.
Yeah.
And I go and do 2 days worth of lessons with her. And I now finally have a horse that is like, okay, now we can teach you things to be fancy. So we're learning our dressage and kind of putting together longer courses and we're working really hard on not scaring people anymore.
That's fair. Yeah. You're like, I don't want to be the person that clears the warm up every single time.
Correct.
So tell me how you were feeling about signing up for this William Fox-Pitt clinic with your mare.
So this was a kind of last minute thing in Aiken. It didn't run quite the way the rest of them did. It was one day, kind of got organized at the very last minute. And surprisingly, despite the fact that I would show up at Bruce Davidson's without a care in the world and my horse's mane would be a disaster, I was pretty anxious about this one, actually. So we had to get the new shiny saddle pad and do the mane and clip the legs and do all the work. So I was actually really quite anxious and excited about this opportunity. I have a lot of respect for William. I love the way he rides. And I was definitely quite anxious, which probably didn't help her any. But we set it up. So instead of doing stadium on the first day and cross country on the second day, we set it up that there were private lessons in the morning and group cross country schools in the evening, in the afternoon. So I did a private flat lesson in the morning for which my horse was full on. And then in the afternoon we did cross country and she was totally chill by then.
Oh, so you did both?
Yeah. And this was the first time I'd
cool.
asked her to stand on the trailer all day, which I think really helped me in the afternoon.
So tell me a little bit about your private flat lesson, because I didn't get to really see him do any of that when I was auditing the clinic up here.
Yeah, it was interesting. I went in with a couple goals. The thing I have the most problem with Whimsy, I call her Whimsy.
Oh, that's a great name.
And so the thing I went in with was, I understand a lot of the theory, but there's a lot of timing that has to happen with Whimsy. She's quite sensitive and she is happy to ignore you. It's quite weird, but if you don't hit the right moment, she's just going to be like, okay, fine, I'm going to lean on the bit and be done with it. And kind of halfway get through everything. So when I went in, I was like, we're not thinking about proper dressage. We're thinking about being a rideable horse on the flat. And this was her first time at the Vista. And she was, as William said, a bit on full boil today. So it was actually a really great lesson, even though it was probably terrible for people to watch. She was full on. There were people schooling in the cross country right next door. And so what he did was he walked up and grabbed the reins and kind of did some flexing on the ground with her. And it was great for me because he had never met this horse and he had never seen this horse get that feeling of trapped that, of course, I, as the owner, was always working around. And so he just grabbed the reins and asked her to do what you would ask a 12-year-old horse to do, which is put your head down and focus. And there were definitely a couple minutes where I was up there and I could feel her say, what is this? And get that almost stuck feeling.
Yeah.
But he was not afraid to ask her to go through it. And so she went right through it. And when I was talking with Kristen and Andrea afterward, I said it was really nice. He was saying the same things, but he had no expectations. So I think all of us would have backed off in that moment. And he was willing to ask. And she was ready to be pushed that hard.
To push through, yeah.
Yeah. And so of a 45-minute lesson, I would guess 30 minutes of it was just walking in tiny little circles, doing very bendy, essy moves, changing the rein and changing the bend and walking faster and walking slower So it didn't look very sexy, but I think it was really good for us because he expected her to act like a normal 12-year-old, not a delicate flower.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like an incredible lesson, like an incredible breakthrough, because I feel like you can kind of get to a point where you can get stuff done, but there is a point that I think emotionally we tend to back off a little bit when our horse meets a certain threshold. And it's really nice for somebody to come in and just see the situation as a completely blank slate without the emotion, without the knowledge of knowing what the horse is like, and just being like, I'm just going to apply this pressure and see where the threshold is and see if we can get the horse past it. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, it was great for me to know that she's ready to be pushed a little bit more. And I wouldn't have trusted very many people to push her that hard. Also, I often say that owners are the worst trainers because I've been with this horse for 5 years. I remember when we didn't stand at the block. We just got on and started trotting and trotted for 15 minutes before we could come back down to the walk. You know? Yeah. And so like everything she does now seems like a massive improvement, which is good. Yeah. It is. But it's also important to be like, you can push her now more than you could a year ago. Yeah. And that is the big progress that she's made. We don't compete, so I don't have that external measure. But what I do have right now is, yeah, she can jump higher. Yeah, our dressage is better. But actually, I can just ask her to do more and put her in more uncomfortable situations without fear of her kind of exploding or jumping the chest bar while she stands in the trailer. We'd been avoiding standing in the trailer because the first time I tried that, she jumped the chest bar.
Oh my God.
She was fantastic this time. But it's, you know, that's the place where she's really grown. And now, hopefully, all the sort of external rewards of, well, I can get around a novice show jumping course and I can get it through a training cross-country combination will come along.
Yeah, and I think expecting more out of them, that's a point in your training that I was talking to somebody else about this recently, where you get to that point where you go, you're not a green horse anymore. There are green elements, right? But there is a point where you go, I have to stop riding this horse like it's green. I have to start saying, no, you're more trained than this.
Yes.
I'm going to put my leg on and you're going to do something when I put my leg on, and you're not going to barge against me or tell me I can't put my leg on, et cetera, you know?
Yeah. Actually, it was about a year ago that I think it was about my fourth lesson with Andrea. And she asked if she could get on the horse. And I said, of course, I'd love for you to get on the horse. And I
was going to ask you if she had ridden your horse.
Yeah. So Bruce rode my horse a couple years ago, and of course, it went beautifully. They always go beautifully.
Bruce. Yeah.
And Andrea got on this horse and kind of worked with her and found the space. And we got to that point of, you need to accept the leg coming on.
Yeah.
And then she's made loads of progress from that year. And now we've had this second moment of, you need to accept that you need to leave your head alone. Mm-hmm. You can look at anything you want. You can be as scared as you want, but your head needs to stay in one place. And he actually did tell me in the lesson, it's fine if she wants to look around, but we know their eyes work. They can see everything with their head down. Yeah. They do not need to put their head way up in the air and stare at everything to see things. They can look around and think about other things while they leave their head in one place.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. Which, in hindsight, of course they can. Why didn't that occur to me?
Right. And so how did the rest of the flat lesson go?
The rest of the flat lesson went really well. I'm pleased with her behavior. Again, it wasn't very fancy to look at. It was mostly just transitions and changes of bend and changing within the gaits. One of the things he said was slow for 3, go for 3, right? So to make lots of transitions within the gait, connect the trot, extend the trot, connect the trot, extend the trot, change the rein, change the bend. So we were doing lots of things like that. And I think for her, that gives her something to think about other than the horses going through the water right over there.
Yeah, she sounds like a very intelligent type of horse, and I think those can be the hardest to ride sometimes, but can be very rewarding.
Yeah, I'm having a great time. I'm really enjoying it, but she is definitely not a horse for everyone. She is also a horse that would not be eaten in the wild. She would run away first. Her feet might give out, but she would run away first.
That is so funny. Classic mare. So what were you hoping to get out of the jumping portion, and which level did you enter?
So she is, ability-wise, right on the line between novice and training. So when Rhonda, who did an excellent job putting together a great clinic on very short notice, asked me, I said she's a novice training his horse. She said, well, which one do you want to fall through? I went with novice. Didn't quite know what we were getting into, so I figured better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
And that was the right call for this specific set of groups. The training group was just on the edge of where we would have been comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so as a group, I think I probably would have put quite a kink in the group interaction and would have made the clinic less good for the rest of the training horses. So we ended up in the group that was, I think, 1 starter horse, 3 beginner novice horses, and then my horse. Yeah. Which for us meant that it wasn't hugely challenging at the height or the questions. Yeah. But the Vista, I'm very grateful, put together several baby trainers. So we got our first experience with trainers, which was great. And they have enough there that you can put together a dozen fences in a row and all stay in the little pasture. I was really pleased with the facility.
It's a beautiful place.
And I'd never been there before.
Yeah.
So it's
really nice too, because I feel like even at the lower levels, you can do like a bank, a ditch, the water. It's all kind of.
And it's all right there. And so it really was everything from like baby, beginner, novice up to just barely kind of pushing on the training level, all in this one field. So I was really happy with the facility and the setup. Observationally, I probably didn't get as much out of that cross-country schooling because she was kind of right at the top of the ability chunk. So there were no like amazing moments that happened as a result of him watching and being like, oh, try this. Yeah. But it was always nice to have somebody put together a course that you wouldn't put together for yourself, that kind of pushes you in that way. And the other thing that was good for me and her specifically is that there were a lot of jumps that weren't perfect, and she kept going confidently. So 6 months ago, if I had missed a distance or kind of been in an uncomfortable spot or been a little bit behind the leg or a little bit flat, she would have jumped, but then like the next one would have been hard. She would have been like, I don't know about this. You were not spot on last time. And so this time she definitely got going, and none of the spots were great. None of it was like, oh, that's a beautiful ride. It was all just a good enough ride. And she was like, okay, I got this. And she went on.
I think that was one of the takeaways that I got from auditing with him was that he made a strong implication that American riders put a big focus on everything looking very nice and pretty. Yeah. And a lot of this riding is about independent thinking horses and independent riders that aren't concerned about how it looks necessarily. And I think that's something that was a big takeaway from what I watched, which was, so what, you had a bad jump, get on with it. There's another jump coming.
So that came up a lot in the intermediate and advanced group down here. There were a couple riders who would get into a combination or get into a string of 4 or 5 fences, and one fence would go badly. And so they'd kind of like circle or go back to start over again. And he was very much, you get one chance. Yeah. Like, don't give up until it's over. Yeah. You need, yes, it's not perfect. Yes, I might want you to come do the combination again. But when you jump in, you need to be committed to getting out. Do not give up on your horse because you didn't like it.
Yeah. 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 That was definitely like the echoing sentiment throughout all of the clinics that I've been interviewing about. And the ones that I saw was that, like, you don't get a second chance on course. You don't get a second chance in stadium. So what, you had a bad jump. So what, you took those standards down. Like, there's another jump coming up.
Yeah.
And you owe it to your horse to say, let's go. Come on. That's just one jump.
And it is your job to provide the confidence to the horse at that point. Like, it's not their job to be like, they don't actually know that knocking the fence is terrible. They don't know you jumped the wrong fence. They don't know you almost went off course. If
they don't know you lost your stirrup. They don't.
If you just keep riding confidently, they'll be like, huh, that was a funny S curve in that line. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Lucinda has this thing that she likes to say, that is, if a horse asks a question, it's unfair not to answer. And I think, and that can apply to just the basic, like, you got to the base of a fence and you took your leg off. And the horse was like, do you want me to go or not?
Yeah.
And if you don't tell the horse, I want you to go, then that's on you, not the horse.
And Bruce has kind of pushed this one step further, that if you answer 99% of the time, and if you reward their attempts 99% of the time, when it matters, they will answer the question the way you wanted them to. Right? But if you give up or you get half-hearted and they kind of scramble over it 50% of the time, when you get to that point on course where you're like, I don't see it, they are going to say, me neither, I'm out. You're not in, I'm not in.
Yeah.
But they will reward you with, actually, I got this one. Because you have the rider has been a reliable guide before. They will step up.
And I think that's a really important point. Emily and I were just talking about this yesterday. We were watching some of her old long format videos, and you can see on course, after this horse has done, 15 miles of trotting and galloping, and it's 3/4 of the way around a big course, that's when you're counting on the horse to, like, dig deep and hope that all of that training is just going to support you, because there's going to be a point on course where you get a little tired and maybe your leg isn't applying as well as you would hope, or you're not seeing a distance. Like you said, that's when the horse gets to do it for you.
Yeah. And if you haven't been there for them before, they're not going to put in the effort for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So did you struggle with anything in particular during the cross country lesson, or was it just you kind of working on yourself and your partnership with your horse?
So we were pretty spot on, as there wasn't like a thing that I could look at. It was just, we were just not quite together perfectly. And so there really wasn't anything for us to fix other than we just needed to jump more jumps. And that's a relatively common problem for me, especially with a horse who's not great at the dressage. It's easy to get into we got to do the dressage. We got to do the dressage. We got to do the dressage. So it was definitely like, okay, just another reminder for me that even if your jumping isn't perfect, you need to jump pretty regularly to keep up your skills. You've only got one horse. Yeah, she's bad at the dressage, but drilling the dressage, eventually, if you're not ever jumping, that jumping will go away, even if the flat gets better.
Well, you need to like have them in partnership with each other. I was just talking to somebody an hour ago about this, and so much of the rideability and show jumping and cross country comes from the basics of working on the flat, but you can't have one without the other, right? So if you're not getting to practice what you've learned on the flat over fences, then it seems like, why are you even doing it?
So I actually jumped yesterday, and all of our problems were on the flat. But they were problems that never arise when I just do dressage, right? It was kind of having our tail end motorcycle out behind us in the turns and get tangled up with her hind legs, that never happens in the dressage, because I'm thinking so much about the horse in the dressage, where when we're jumping, I'm looking at the fence. And there's this whole other thing. And so I would never know that was a problem if I didn't jump. So now I have a thing to work on the flat that is a flat problem, but I never would have known it was there without the jumping.
I think jumping is such a good way to show you the holes in your rideability and flat work,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're like, what happened to all of my straightness? Oh, there it is.
And for me, that happens especially in show jumping because I'm actually pretty good at galloping on. Mm-hmm. And that just has to be straight. If you're galloping on, your horse is going to be straight. But when you're kind of waiting to get into a one stride or a two stride, then it's really easy to get crooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Or you're doing a turning question. You're coming off a turn and you're suddenly on the wrong lead and you don't have time to fix it. And you're like, how do I get this horse straight?
Yeah.
So did William have any particular comments for you on the fact that your horse was an off-the-track thoroughbred or anything about thoroughbreds in general?
He didn't particularly, although that on Boyle comment might have been specific. He did have a couple pieces of comments that aren't directly related to her being a thoroughbred, but probably happen a little bit more in the thoroughbreds. So one was when he has a greener horse, when they go to a new place, he kind of gives them several laps around the arena at a walk and a trot without caring how they're going, letting them look at things. Yes, their head might be straight up in the air. Yes, they might be jigging in place. But don't worry about those things. Just let her get a feel of where she is. Mm-hmm. And then ask for her to come into business. He was also mentioning that type of horse might be a very easy horse to get going a little too fast on the cross country. And so the one thing he did say to me cross country was that our pacing was actually pretty good. I give a lot of credit to Bonnie Mosser. I did a Bonnie Mosser clinic over the summer about finding your pace and galloping in that pace.
Oh, that's really cool.
So we had kind of established a pretty good galloping rate and feeling quite comfortable at that pace, which I think, especially in the moving from novice to training, is a big challenge. Because really at novice, everything is far enough apart, even the combinations, that you really could trot into every combination and get out just fine. And that at training, it's a bigger deal to be at the pace and find that pace. So I was glad to have the opportunity to kind of have that reaffirmed that, yes, you're finding a good pace. Even if you're not finding the right distance, the good pace will support a worse distance.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Do you have any sort of lasting impressions from riding with William Fox-Pitt?
So the big one is I will go back, right? I always think Whimsy, as she is a hard horse to give a one-off lesson on because I don't know what she's going to do. And so I was really pleased that he focused in on something. It didn't need to be fancy. I know sometimes in clinics, it's like, okay, so what is on the edge of your experience that we need to do? Do we need to jump bigger fences or do fancier dressage stuff? And he didn't. He went straight back to the basics, which is where she's weakest. I actually have every confidence that when she's straight and the one tempies and the piafs and the pirouettes will all be beautiful because she's demonstrated them to me many times. So it was really a great one-off lesson of someone who's not looking at this horse every day, who's like, okay, this is what the horse is supposed to do, so we're going to do that. And be able to push me past what I'm comfortable asking for.
I think that when you're in experiences like that, or even when you're lessoning, like my horse can be a lot more tense and a lot more spooky at home than he is off property. And I want sometimes for him to be tense during lessons because I need to know how to ride through that and how to get through to him and recreate the feeling that he'll give me when he's in a place that he's a little bit more insecure. He gets a little cocky, a little bit like well, what can I do now? And so I think that there's a lot to be said for your horse being really fizzy and up and being like, well, this is the horse I've got today, so let's figure out how to work through it. And I think that that's a very valuable experience.
As I've gotten older, certainly as a kid and a young adult, it's like, oh, I want my horse to be perfect for all of these things. Now that I'm older, I am paying $400 for my horse to not be perfect.
Yeah.
I am paying $400 for you to tell me how to fix problems.
Yes.
So I actually do not mind anymore when they make complete and utter fools out of me in those.
Did he have any feedback for you since he got to see you ride on the flat and then also see you cross country school? Did he piece anything together for you from that experience?
I think he was actually a little bit surprised that she was so sane out on cross country. I don't think that's the horse he was expecting to encounter out there. There were a couple other horses in the group. We had one horse who absolutely pitched a fit in the middle of the lesson and decided that even though he'd gone down several banks already, that 3-inch bank, we are not going down.
Oh,
period.
No.
So we definitely had a good chunk of the lesson that was kind of redirected toward a very specific problem. And so there wasn't anything that I kind of think he should have seen or would have appreciated him commenting on, given that my horse was pretty comfortable at the level, at the height and the questions. It was just more of a confidence building thing for the two of us, as opposed to like, here is this new question we need to introduce. And so he didn't directly bring anything together. He did mention that she has a very good canter. And of course, we're holding the canter pace very well cross country. So we could bring those two things together. And cross country is not the place where I would have expected to see all of that suppling work come together as much as it might have shown up in a stadium lesson, which I signed up for one private and the group. And so I didn't have a stadium, but I would have expected that to show up much more in stadium. And I'm a much worse stadium rider. So the kind of direct connections, I don't think there were any I would have expected him to make, just given where the horse was that weekend. Yeah. Now, if he came back in 3 months, I'm confident she would definitely be in the training group and we would have a lot more kind of specific things to work on. Yeah. Actually, the weekend after that was Stableview, the eventing academy at Stableview. And Andrea did come up for that. And we did most of the training questions on the cross-country course. And so there were lots of places where he could have found kind of specific things to pull at, because we were just at the edge of our ability as opposed to like live in it. Yeah. Sounds like you did the right thing. And I think that most people would say that when you're going to sign up for a clinic, especially with somebody that you've never ridden with before, that it's best to go down a level than be on the cusp of comfortability. And I don't mind being pushed, but not only would that have been not a great plan going in, it's definitely the case that if she had been in the training group, we would have been so much busy with her kind of doing these slightly more advanced questions that would have ruined the experience for everybody else and their horses. And so, especially in a group, especially a new clinician, especially a new place, I was really happy to bump her down a level. I was super thrilled that she was so confident in herself that she didn't hold a missed distance at one fence against me at the next one. She just cantered up and was like, okay, fine. No problem. So it wasn't, there was nothing about it that I could be like, oh yeah, William was integral to making that happen on the cross country. But then again, would I have ever put myself in the situation to string together those dozen fences without him there? Probably not. Probably not. Right. Yeah. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us again. If you liked what you heard today, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, follow us on social media and our website for some really cool bonus content from this episode, where Neve actually got to interview William Fox-Pitt and get his take on OTTBs and hear about some cool ones that she's written and competed. You can find us on Instagram at OTTB_on_tap. And we're also on Facebook and TikTok as OTTB on tap. We would also love to hear from you, so please sign up for our newsletter and send us a message on our website at www.ottbontap.com. We'd love to hear about any candidates you'd like us to interview, topics, suggestions, anything like that. Thanks all.
Bye.